Why was she always invisible at the table? No one ever asked. No one ever cared. Flora Mitchell stood at the perimeter fence of Forward Operating Base Vanguard, a chipped mug of tea cooling in her hands. She had been awake since 300 hours before the morning briefing. The Romanian dawn broke across the impale streaks, mist clinging to the valley, diesel generators humming behind her like a second heartbeat. Boots crunched against gravel as the night patrol returned, their rifles slung low, their faces tired. She didn't move, didn't speak. She rarely did. At 25, Flora was 5'3", barely 115 pounds after a full meal. She was the kind of soldier most men looked past without a second thought, a logistics officer, a support player, the one who cataloged the rifles, polished optics, and ensured every last battery was charged before the real soldiers went out to fight. They had a name for her. Pocket. Not cruel, not kind, just dismissive. And yet, hidden behind her quiet exterior, she carried a private obsession, a secret that no one would credit her with, not even if she screamed it at them. She had spent months studying ballistics, memorizing wind patterns, learning every line of the manuals that others left to gather dust. She knew every weapon on the base as if they were extensions of her own body, especially one. The .50 caliber. The monster in the armory. The rifle nobody believed she could even lift, let alone fire. At 5:30 the operators gathered in the briefing tent. The air was charged, maps pinned to every wall, red markers outlining hostile positions, green lines for planned routes. Major stood at the front, sharp-eyed, steady, commanding. He scanned his team, assigning roles with a precision that cut like a scalpel. Reeves, lead marksman, spotter, comms, overwatch. Flora waited, stylus hovering over her tablet, even though she already knew. She always knew. Mitchell said finally, not even looking at her. Gear accountability. Ensure all optics and comms are when the teams return. Gear accountability, again. Her jaw tightened. She nodded quietly, obediently. Around her the others exchanged grins, a shared current of confidence. To them she was background, furniture, not a soldier who could stand beside them, shoulder to shoulder. She packed her tablet and tried not to hear the words that followed, but she did. She always did. Good thing Mitchell isn't coming with us, muttered. Too small to cover my back in a firefight. His reply was softer, diplomatic. She's competent enough, but competent isn't combat ready. The words burned, they always did. She could outshoot half the men in this room on the range. Her analysis scores exceeded theirs. She saw patterns they missed, but to them she was small, fragile, a liability. And still part of her understood. Physical power mattered in combat. Endurance mattered. Size mattered. But why did no one ever consider that grit mattered too? That determination, precision, and refusal to quit could weigh just as much as muscle. They never gave her the chance. Later, while the helicopters thundered away into the mist, Flora slipped into the armory. She moved past shelves of neatly stacked magazines and crates of optics to her hidden notebook, thick, worn, filled with calculations, ballistic tables, elevation adjustments, wind drift estimates, pages of range cards she had created without being asked. Nobody knew, nobody cared, but Flora believed something few dared to. Preparation wasn't just about orders, it was survival. 3 weeks later, the mission was over. The men came back grinning, decorated with commendations, carrying stories of close calls and triumphs. Flora updated the gear logs alone. She nursed a lukewarm tea in the corner of the mess hall, pretending not to feel the sting of being excluded. That's when the whispers began. Mitchell spends a lot of time in the armory, someone said. Too much time for logistics, always asking questions about sniper systems, ballistics, stuff that's not her lane. Kind of makes you wonder what she's planning. Her pen froze on the page. Heat flushed her cheeks. She confronted one of them later, near the depot. Harrison, the one who had whispered. "Is there something you'd like to say to me directly?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He looked away, uncomfortable. "Don't take it personal. You're intense, always studying things outside your role. Maybe you should just focus on your lane. Let operators handle operator work." The words hit harder than a punch. Focus on your lane. As if the boundaries they'd drawn around her were law. As if her hunger to understand, to prepare, was arrogance instead of dedication. Even her friends began to drift. Even Sarah, one of the few women on base, kept her distance. Doubt spread like an infection, and then Major summoned her. His desk was neat, precise, like him. Her file was spread across it like a case in a tribunal. "Mitchell," he said, fingers tapping on the paper, "your technical skills are comprehensive, but there are concerns. You seem more interested in duties outside your role. I need logistics personnel focused on logistics, not distracted by fantasies of combat." Fantasies, that's what he called them. She defended herself. She reminded him of her record, her evaluations, her flawless execution of assigned duties. But's voice cut through her words with ice-cold certainty. "The mission requires you to track equipment, nothing more. Scale back your extracurricular activities." When she left, it felt like her chest had been caved in. Her months of study, the charts, the calculations, the long nights, dismissed as dangerous ambition. She stared at her notebook that night in her quarters. She thought of burning it, thought of giving in, but she didn't. She locked it away, hands trembling, and whispered to herself that survival meant always being ready. Even when no one wanted you to be. The days blurred into routine. The armory, the range. Long, secret hours in the cold, her service rifle pressed against her cheek. She practiced before dawn, wind tugging at her hair, her breath steady as she squeezed off shot after shot. 2-inch groups at 300 meters, better than most of the designated marksmen on base. It didn't matter, no one was watching. At night she returned to the armory. She timed the guard rotations, memorized access codes, waited until the silence was absolute. Then she slid from its case. It dwarfed her, nearly 30 pounds of steel and power, a rifle designed to punch through walls, engines, even armored glass. She wasn't allowed to fire it, but she didn't need to fire to learn. She practiced loading, unloading, adjusting the massive scope, shifting into prone positions, training her body to absorb its weight. Every motion became muscle memory. And still, she knew it wasn't enough. She studied manuals until her eyes burned, watched wind ripple through grass to gauge patterns, memorized terrain features from satellite maps. She trained her grip strength climbing rocks in the hills, learned to steady her core under strain. She built herself piece by piece into something no one believed she could be. Because she knew one day the moment would come. And when it did, she would be ready. But readiness is a strange thing. It doesn't guarantee opportunity. It doesn't promise recognition. Sometimes it just waits, hidden like a spark. And sometimes that spark only ignites when everything else is already on fire. She didn't know it yet, but the test she had been waiting for, the one that would either destroy her or prove her, was already on its way. What made her keep going when everyone else told her to stop? Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was survival. The Romanian morning carried a strange chill as Flora walked toward the firing range. The base was quiet, most of the soldiers still asleep. She preferred it that way. Alone, no one could laugh when her hands lingered on rifles she wasn't assigned to. No one could dismiss her steady groupings as irrelevant. No one could remind her that her role was to polish and count, not to aim and fire. The .50 caliber haunted her. She could feel its weight even when she wasn't holding it, could picture its black silhouette in the armory shadows. It was more than a weapon to her. It was a symbol of what she was told she couldn't do, of the space they said she could never fill. But she studied anyway. Every evening she traced bullet trajectories in her notebook, calculated bullet drop across distances most soldiers couldn't even imagine, learned how temperature, humidity, and pressure twisted the path of a round in flight. She studied until the numbers blurred, until the equations bled into instinct. And then, every dawn, she put that knowledge into practice. She lined up her service rifle, adjusted for the faint wind curling across the valley, and exhaled slow, steady hands, calm trigger pull. Another tight group punched into the target at 300 meters, not perfection, but close enough to silence anyone if anyone had bothered to look. No one did. Her requests for advanced marksmanship training had been months ago. Logistics personnel didn't need precision shooting, command said. But she knew better. In war, every skill mattered. Every overlooked detail could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. Her small size, once mocked, became her quiet advantage. In prone positions, her body was steady, her movements efficient. Years of working with delicate equipment gave her precise trigger control. Her analytical mind treated shooting as mathematics, not bravado. She wasn't there to prove her toughness. She was there to solve problems no one else even recognized. But when the briefings came, when tactical maps spread across tables, her voice was shut out. One afternoon pointed to red zones scrawled across a map. Enemy snipers increasing activity in the, he said, tapping the, we need countermeasures. Flora leaned forward, recognizing the terrain instantly. She studied it for weeks, memorized every line, every angle of sight. Sir, she began, cautious, I've analyzed this area. There are natural choke points. If enemy snipers establish crossfire there. Mitchell cut her off sharp. We need logistics reports, ammunition, supplies. Leave tactical analysis to the operators. Her face flushed. The room was silent for a beat, then moved on without her. She swallowed the heat in her chest, forced her voice steady. At current use rates, we have 14 days ammunition, sir. That was all he wanted. That was all they thought she was. When the meeting ended, she approached Sergeant Williams privately. She tried again, explained her analysis, pointed out the positions enemy snipers would likely use. Williams listened politely, but his words were predictable. Outside your lane, Mitchell. Leave tactics to the operators. It wasn't rejection anymore. It was a wall, solid, reinforced, immovable. She learned something that day. Institutions didn't need to insult you to kill your spirit. They only needed to box you in until you stopped pushing at the edges. But Flora didn't stop. That night when the base was quiet, she slipped back into the armory. The emergency lights glowed faint red, rows of steel casting long shadows. She knew every code, every rotation, every weak spot in security. Her work in logistics had given her knowledge most operators overlooked. She opened this case. It gleamed under the light like something alive. Nearly 30 pounds of raw power, more rifle than most men could handle, but in her hands it felt right. Heavy, yes. Brutal, yes, but not impossible. She couldn't fire it, couldn't risk the report echoing across the valley, but she could practice everything else. Loading, unloading, adjusting the massive scope, sliding into prone, finding her natural point of aim, over and over until her body learned the movements without her mind needing to command them. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't dramatic, it was repetition, quiet, unseen, relentless repetition. And while others drank, joked, or slept, Flora mapped firing solutions for every within 30 kilometers of the base. She studied the terrain like scripture. She memorized wind corridors, atmospheric pressure ranges, the subtle dips and rises that could shift a shot by inches at 1,000 meters. No one asked her to. No one wanted her to, but she did it anyway, because someday someone would need it. Weeks passed, then months, and always the same routine. Briefings where her input was dismissed, training exercises where she was assigned paperwork while others practiced tactics, debriefs where her observations collected dust. And yet every night she prepared. Because she knew something they didn't. She knew the world doesn't ask if you're ready before it demands that you act. And the day came when the alarms shattered her routine. It was 8:47 hours when the klaxons wailed, slicing through her morning inventory. She dropped her clipboard and ran, boots hammering against the concrete. The command center erupted in chaos, voices shouting, radios crackling with fragments of disaster. Contact left, multiple hostiles. We're pinned down, need immediate support. She knew that voice, Sergeant Reeves, the unit's lead marksman. His tone carried the edge of desperation. "Base, this is Eagle 6, his voice cracked through the static. "We've got eyes on the target building, but enemy snipers have us locked down. 2 confirmed, possibly 3. Overlapping fields of fire, we can't move." Flora froze, her blood ran cold. She knew this pattern, she had warned about it. Weeks ago she had mapped predicted this very trap. No one listened. And now Eagle Team was paying the price. "Enemy weapons," demanded. "High-end," Reeves answered. .338 at minimum, possibly .50 caliber. These aren't militia rifles, these are professionals. The room filled with grim silence. Operators studied the tactical display, Eagle Team trapped in a valley, enemy snipers above, angles covered, extraction routes cut off. Helicopters were grounded by weather. Reinforcements hours away. Flora stepped forward, voice cutting into the storm. "Sir, I know that area, the eastern ridge." "Not now," Mitchell snapped. His eyes didn't even shift from the map. She bit down hard, fists clenched, but the words pressed against her chest until they broke free. "Sir, I've studied this terrain. I know where they are. Give me the .50, I can reach them." The room went still. Every eye turned. Some widened in disbelief. Others narrowed in concern. A few smirked. His voice came low, cold. "Mitchell, you are logistics, not a sniper, not combat qualified. This is not a discussion." Her pulse pounded in her ears, but she didn't stop. "I can do it. I know the angles. I know the rifle. I've prepared for this exact scenario. Give me the chance." The silence stretched like a wire ready to snap. Reeves's voice broke through the radio, raw with panic. "Base hit. Shoulder wound, heavy bleeding. We need counter-sniper fire now or we're finished." Every second stretched. Every heartbeat louder. Eagle Team was dying. And the only person who had studied the solution stood ignored at the edge of the room. She had been told her entire career to stay in her lane, to accept her place, to be small, quiet, invisible. But not today. Today she was done waiting for permission. What would it take for someone like her to be heard? Apparently, the end of everything. The command center was thick with static and fear. Radios screamed, maps flickered, officers argued. Eagle Team's voices broke through the noise, clipped and strained, pressed tight by panic. "Base, ammunition's low. Snipers shifting positions, trying to flank us. If we don't get relief." Then silence, punctuated only by Reeves's ragged voice. "We're not going to last." Flora felt her chest tighten. She looked at the faces around her. Hardened men, trained professionals, their confidence cracking as reality set in. Extraction was impossible. Reinforcements too far. Conventional tactics useless. The solution was clear. It had been clear weeks ago. But when she said it aloud, the words landed like madness. "Give me the," she repeated, steady, louder this time. "I can take them." Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone chuckled in disbelief. Another whispered, "Is she serious?" His gaze locked onto her. "Mitchell," he said, his voice measured, dangerous. "You are not a sniper. You have never deployed in combat. You are suggesting we hand over a weapon that outweighs you to deal with trained professionals. Do you understand how absurd this sounds?" "Yes, sir," she answered. "But absurd doesn't matter, saving them does." His jaw flexed. He turned back to the map, effectively dismissing her. "You are relieved. Report to quarters." The rejection sliced deep, not because of pride, because every wasted second dragged Eagle Team closer to death. She stood frozen, her voice caught in her throat, while the room moved on without her. Over the radio, Reeves's voice cracked again. "We're down to 90 minutes of ammo. It's bleeding out. If support doesn't come soon." The transmission broke into static. Flora's heart hammered. She wanted to scream, to shake them, to force them to see what she saw, but all she saw in their faces was dismissal. Amateur liability, invisible. She turned and left, the order hanging heavy on her shoulders. Outside, the air was damp and sharp, the Romanian sky closing in with low clouds. Helicopter blades turned in vain on the tarmac, grounded by weather that refused to clear. She walked to her quarters as if in a dream, every step heavier than the last. Inside, silence, the cot, the desk, the notebook. She sat, staring at her hands, small and pale, hands no one believed strong enough to carry the weight of the mission. Through the window, she saw the command center lights burning, officers still debating, Eagle Team still dying. And something inside her broke. She had begged for recognition. She had followed orders, respected chains of command, waited for a chance that never came. And now, when her chance arrived, they dismissed her again. But she realized something in that silence. Being dismissed meant she was no longer bound by permission. The rejection freed her. She opened her locker, pulled on combat fatigues she technically wasn't authorized to wear, fastened her vest, checked her climbing gear. Her hands were steady now, calm. She pulled out her notebook thick with months of data, range cards, and calculations. She slid it into her pack. Then she paused. Her gaze fell on an envelope at the bottom of the locker, the letter to her sister in Scotland, written months ago for this very possibility, if she never came back. She held it for a moment, her throat tightening, then slid it back under the gear. She couldn't think about it now. Radio chatter bled through the walls of the base. "Eagle 6, this is base. Hold position." "Negative. Holding position means we die." Reeves's voice was ragged, furious. Flora zipped her pack, secured her rifle, and whispered to herself, "If not me, then who?" She moved fast, head down, blending into the storm of activity. Everyone was too busy to notice one logistics officer slipping into the armory. She timed it perfectly, 14:30 hours, when attention was elsewhere. The steel door loomed. She punched in the code, the one she'd memorized weeks ago. The lock clicked. She slipped inside. This case waited in the shadows. She opened it with slow reverence, as if waking a sleeping predator. The rifle gleamed immense, almost longer than she was tall. She lifted it. Heavy, yes, but not impossible. She had trained for this. Every motion was familiar now. Bipod, scope, loading procedure. She moved like water, like breath. The weapon became an extension of her body. She slung it across her shoulders and stepped back into the dim corridor. Her heart pounded, but not from fear, from clarity. There was no turning back now. She slipped out through the maintenance gate. Another detail she'd memorized, another small, unnoticed crack in the system. The lock yielded to her careful hands. She stepped into the wild Romanian countryside, closing the gate softly behind her. The air was sharp, carrying the smell of damp earth. Rolling hills stretched ahead, leading to the foothills. Somewhere out there, Eagle Team clung to life. Somewhere out there, 3 enemy snipers waited. Flora adjusted the across her back and began to move. Her pace was steady, deliberate. She kept low, using every scrap of cover, her small frame fitting where larger men might be exposed. The rifle weighed on her shoulders, dragging at her muscles, but she had trained for this load. Her lungs burned, but she forced each breath to slow, controlled. She crossed open ground in bursts, heart hammering, the silence pressing in on all sides. She felt the land as if it were alive, the dips, the ridges, the way the wind curled through the valleys. Radio chatter flickered in her ear from the net she tapped into. Enemy snipers shifting fire, their walking rounds toward us. "We're nearly black on ammo." losing blood fast. She pushed harder, her boots digging into the mud, every step a refusal to let them die unseen. The ridge loomed ahead, jagged and steep. The route she had memorized wound up through rocks and sparse trees. She began to climb, her fingers locking into cracks, her small body moving with quiet precision. The complicated everything. Its length snagged, its weight threatened to pull her backward. But she had trained for this too. Months of secret practice carrying dead weight up hills, rehearsing awkward maneuvers until they became fluid. Her grip was iron, her core steady. She climbed. Halfway up she paused, chest heaving, and raised her scope. Through it she could see flashes of movement in the valley below. Eagle team, trapped, pinned, firing back in desperation. And there, higher up, faint glints of metal, the hidden positions of enemy snipers. Exactly where she had predicted. Exactly as she had warned. She pressed on. The final stretch was a ledge barely wider than her boots. She edged across, wind tugging at her, the void yawning below. One misstep would mean death for her and for Eagle Team. She clung to the rock, teeth gritted inch by inch until she reached the hollow she had chosen weeks ago. Concealed, elevated, perfect. She unslung and set it on its bipod. The metal legs sank into the soil, steadying the weapon. She adjusted the scope, her hands calm, precise. She checked her range cards, memorized numbers flowing back like an old language. Wind 8 knots southwest. Temperature 22 degrees Celsius. Range to target 847 meters. Her breath slowed, her world narrowed. Through the glass the first sniper came into focus. Hidden behind camouflage, rifle trained on Eagle Team. Professional, deadly, unaware of her. She inhaled 4 seconds. Exhaled 6 seconds. Paused still. Her finger touched the trigger. For months she had prepared in shadows, told she was nothing but support. For months she had been invisible, forgotten, ignored. But now, in this moment, every calculation, every request, every long night of secret training converged. She squeezed. The roared like thunder, shaking the earth beneath her. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, powerful but manageable. Through the scope, she saw the target crumple, his rifle falling silent. One down. But the echo of her shot rolled across the valley, and every eye, enemy and friendly, turned toward her ridge. She worked the bolt, chambered another round, her hands moving like clockwork. Eagle Team's voices exploded over the radio. Jesus Christ, someone's out there. Someone just dropped one of them. Flora's breath steadied again, her eyes locked on the second target. The battle was no longer Eagle Team, alone. It was hers now. How long could she stay hidden now that the thunder had announced her? Not long, not nearly long enough. This recoil still vibrated through her bones as the first enemy sniper collapsed, motionless. Smoke drifted from the muzzle, carried on the valley wind. For a breathless moment silence, then chaos. Radio chatter exploded in her ear. Reeves's voice cracked with shock. Bass, one sniper down, I say again, one sniper neutralized. His tone shifted, frantic hope punching through despair. Unknown shooter East Ridge. The unknown shooter. Sorry. But the enemy wasn't stunned for long. Through her scope she saw the second sniper shift, abandoning his perfect hide. He was moving fast, slipping into a new position. His partner's death had exposed them, and now he was hunting for the source. Flora exhaled slow, adjusted her scope, tracked him. He darted behind cover, only slivers of movement visible. She calculated lead angles, corrected for the slight shift in wind. Time was short. She squeezed. The thundered again, echoing like artillery. The supersonic round cut the distance, and through her scope she saw the impact. The second sniper fell hard, his rifle tumbling from his hands. Her heart pounded, 2 down, 1 left. Base, this is Eagle 6, Reeves shouted. 2 tangos down, we've got a chance, moving to secondary positions now. But before relief could settle, the third sniper fired. The crack of his rifle split the air, followed by a sharp burst of stone exploding inches from Flora's head. She ducked instinctively as shards of rock stung her cheek. He had found her. She pressed herself low, breath ragged, pulse pounding. She wasn't invisible anymore. Another shot. Sparks leapt from the rock near her elbow. He was walking his fire closer with cold, professional precision. Every shot narrowed the gap. Flora forced her hand steady, pulled the back to her shoulder. Through the scope she found him, partially concealed, almost perfect cover, only a sliver of shoulder exposed. Her breathing slowed, though her heart screamed. She calculated the angle, the drop, the drift. The shot had to be perfect. Another enemy round cracked past, so close she felt the air punch against her skin. The rock behind her shattered. If she hesitated, she was dead. If she rushed, Eagle Team was dead. Her world narrowed to crosshairs and breath. Inhale 4 seconds. Exhale 6. Pause still. She squeezed. The roared recoil slamming back into her shoulder. Through the scope, the third sniper jerked, fell, then went still. Silence. The valley held its breath. Then Reeves's voice burst through the radio, raw with disbelief. All snipers neutralized. Repeat, all snipers neutralized. We're moving now. Relief flooded her chest, sharp and overwhelming. They were alive because of her, because she refused to stay invisible. But it wasn't over. She stayed prone, scanning for additional threats. No movement, no glint of rifles, only the valley below, now shifting with Eagle Team's withdrawal. She realized her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crashing through her veins. The weight of what she had done hit her like a wave. She had fired without authorization. She had killed 3 professional snipers at nearly a kilometer. She had broken every order, every regulation, every boundary they had built around her. And she had saved lives. The lay across her arms like an extension of her will, but she knew the truth. Saving them had been the easy part. Now she would have to answer for it. She broke down the firing position with practiced speed, collecting every casing, every trace. She knew how the military worked. There would be investigations, tribunals, questions she could never answer truthfully without condemning herself. But none of that mattered in the moment. She moved back across the ledge, heart still pounding, dragging at her shoulders. Every step down the ridge was heavier, weighed with the knowledge that her career, her freedom, might already be over. The climb tested her again, every slip of boot on rock a reminder that gravity showed no mercy. By the time she reached the valley floor, her muscles ached, her arms burned, her throat felt raw from swallowed breaths. The radio was still alive with Eagle Team's voices, urgent but alive, hopeful, grateful. They had no idea it was her. When she slipped back toward the base perimeter, her legs shook with exhaustion. She passed through the maintenance gate, locking it behind her, and moved like a ghost through the shadows. Inside her quarters she collapsed on the cot, case sealed again, hands trembling as if the shots were still vibrating in her bones. She had done the unthinkable, and she knew it was only the beginning. Hours later the command center buzzed with energy. Eagle Team staggered back into the base, battered but alive. Reeves's arm was slung in a bloody sling, pale but conscious. Relief rolled across the camp like a wave. But with the relief came questions. Who was on that ridge? Reeves asked, his voice still hoarse. Those shots, they weren't ours. We didn't have the range. No one answered. Officers exchanged uncertain glances. Theories spun. Maybe another NATO unit. Maybe unseen allies. Maybe luck. But not her, never her. Flora stood at the edge of the crowd, invisible as always, clutching her clipboard like armor. She didn't speak, didn't reveal herself. She only watched Reeves laugh through his pain, watched get carried to the medics, watched the base breathe again because 3 snipers lay dead in the hills. Her chest ached with a strange mix of pride and dread. Because she knew what came next. Investigations, interrogations. The military didn't like unsanctioned miracles, and she had just performed one. That night she sat alone, the ballistics notebook on her lap. The pages were worn, edges bent, numbers scrawled with obsessive care. Proof of what she had prepared for, proof of what she had become. She turned the last page and stared at the empty paper, pen trembling in her hand. She wanted to write, to record what had happened, to mark the day her calculations became reality. But she couldn't, not yet. The silence of her quarters pressed against her, and in that silence she realized something she hadn't before. The hardest part wasn't proving she could do it. The hardest part would be living with what came after. Because now the truth was out there, hidden but undeniable. Someone on that ridge had shattered the rules. And eventually, someone would figure out who. Why didn't she feel relief? She had saved them, all of them, and yet the weight in her chest only grew heavier. The base pulsed with life the next morning. Laughter carried from the mess hall. Medics worked tirelessly on, patching his bloodied shoulder. Reeves moved stiffly but alive, his grin returning in fragments. Eagle Team, though bruised and battered, had survived the valley. Because of her. And no one knew. Flora sat in her corner, tea cooling in her hands. She watched the celebration from a distance. She tried to smile to let the quiet pride settle inside her, but instead, unease gnawed at her ribs. The operators speculated endlessly. Had to be another unit in the sector, said between mouthfuls of eggs. No way we'd have known, countered. Whoever it was, they had the range dialed. Those weren't lucky shots. Doesn't matter who it was, Reeves cut in, voice hoarse. Whoever pulled that trigger saved our lives. His words should have warmed her. Instead, they burned, because he was right, and he was wrong. The truth was dangerous now. By afternoon, suspicion had begun to creep into the edges of camp life. Major summoned the teams to the command center, his expression taut with restrained frustration. 3 professional enemy snipers neutralized, he began. At extended range, without authorization, without identification. Someone fired those shots from the eastern ridge. That much is clear. The room was silent. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably. No one volunteered. No one even knew where to look. His gaze swept the room. If it was an allied element, command was not informed. If it was someone on this base, then protocols were violated at the highest level. Either way, it will be investigated. Thoroughly. His voice sharpened. Do not mistake this for heroics. Unauthorized action endangers missions, undermines trust. Whoever did this, he let the words hang, will answer for it. Flora's pulse hammered. She kept her eyes low, expression neutral, pretending to scribble notes. Invisible again. She had never relied on that invisibility before. Now it was her only shield. But whispers had already started. Mitchell spends a lot of time in the armory, one soldier muttered behind her. She's always asking about ballistics, another replied. Come on, a third said. She couldn't even shoulder that rifle. The doubt cut both ways, suspicion on one edge, dismissal on the other. She lived in the balance between them, knowing both could destroy her if either sharpened too far. That evening she returned to her quarters, closing the door softly. That was back in its case, sealed in the armory where it belonged. But her hands still remembered its weight, her shoulders still remembered its recoil, her ears still rang with the sound of its thunder. She opened her notebook. The numbers stared back at her, accusing. She thought of Reeves's words, of his gratitude for the unseen hand that saved them. She thought of his cold warning, the threat in his measured voice. And then she thought of the look on his pale face as he was carried into the med bay. The look of a man who would not have survived another hour under fire. The contradiction tore at her, pride and fear, vindication and dread, relief and guilt. Why did saving lives feel like betrayal? The days that followed twisted. Sergeant Williams stopped her in the depot, his tone sharper than usual. "Mitchell, your inventory checks. Double-check them. Command is reviewing all armory access logs. Any discrepancies they'll notice." "I don't make discrepancies," she said evenly. "Make sure you don't," he replied. But his eyes lingered on her, searching, calculating. Later, during physical training, she caught glances, whispers when she finished ahead of men twice her size. Some looks carried doubt, others, quiet curiosity. Even Sarah, once her closest ally, seemed distant. "They're asking questions," she murmured, not meeting Flora's eyes. "Be careful." Flora nodded but said nothing. What could she say? That the miracle everyone debated in hushed tones was hers. That she had saved them not with luck, not with chance, but with months of unseen preparation. That the weapon they thought she couldn't lift had been steady as her heartbeat when it mattered most. The truth would not save her, not here, not now. And yet, as days stretched into a week, something else began to stir. Reeves found her one evening near the firing range. His arm was bandaged, his movements stiff, but his grin was real. "Funny thing," he said, lowering his voice. "The more I think about it, the more I wonder. Whoever was on that ridge, they didn't just take shots. They calculated, precise, clean, professional. That wasn't luck. That was someone who knew exactly what they were doing." Flora's chest tightened. She kept her expression calm. Maybe it was another NATO unit. Reeves shook his head. "We'd have known, and no one else had access to that ridge as fast as they did. Whoever it was," he studied her. His grin faded. "They saved us. I owe them my life." Her throat went dry. She forced herself to hold his gaze. "Then maybe don't ask too many questions." He studied her a moment longer, then nodded slowly, almost knowingly. He didn't press, but the silence between them carried weight. That night Flora lay awake staring at the ceiling. The base was quiet, but her mind was not. She had crossed a line, she knew it, and lines once crossed never disappeared. But she also knew this. The men who survived that valley were alive because she refused to stay in the lane they had painted for her. The cost would come, it always did. But for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel invisible anymore. She felt dangerous. How long could she carry a secret this heavy? Secrets always left a trace. 2 weeks after Eagle Team's impossible survival, the investigation arrived. Not quiet suspicion anymore, official scrutiny. Officers from higher command landed at the base in a dust storm of rotor wash and clipped authority. They carried sealed files, blank expressions, and questions sharp enough to cut through stone. Their presence shifted the air across Vanguard. Conversations grew hushed. Laughter dulled. Eyes tracked movements more carefully. Flora felt it before she heard it. The way silence followed her into the mess hall. The way glances lingered when she passed the armory. The way her name seemed to ride on lips, whispered, unfinished. It was only a matter of time. She was summoned to Major's office first. The summons alone made her pulse quicken. His office was colder than usual, blinds drawn against the pale Romanian light. He sat behind his desk, rigid, every inch the officer of precision. 2 investigators flanked him, outsiders, their uniforms immaculate, their faces unreadable. "Mitchell," said, voice clipped, "take a seat." She obeyed. Her hands rested on her knees, steady only because she forced them to be. 3 enemy snipers were eliminated during Eagle Team's engagement, one investigator began. "Professional shots, long range, unaccounted for. We need to know what you observed that day." Her throat tightened. She remembered the recoil slamming into her shoulder, the echoes rolling across the valley, the silence after the third body fell. She remembered Eagle Team's voices, alive because of her. But she couldn't tell them that. "I was on base," she said evenly. "Inventory checks. I monitored radio traffic, that's all." The investigator's gaze lingered, searching for cracks. You never left the base perimeter. No, sir. You're certain? Yes, sir. Silence stretched. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she held their gaze, her face calm, her words steady. Finally spoke, his tone sharp enough to wound. Mitchell has always been thorough in her duties. She is logistics, nothing more. The dismissal cut, even as it shielded her. Afterward, she left the office with her face composed, but inside she was unraveling. Every word had been a lie, every calm breath a mask, and though she had survived the questioning, she knew the net was tightening. Whispers grew louder. In the firing range, she overheard muttering too, his arm still bound in a sling. She's always at the range before dawn. You ever notice? Frowned, yeah, but she only uses her service rifle. Still pressed, the way she studies you think she could. Don't start rumors, cut him off. She's logistics, end of story. But even denial carried doubt. That night Flora sat at her desk staring at her notebook. The pages blurred before her eyes. She thought about burning it, reducing months of calculations, every line of evidence to ash. But her hand wouldn't move. The book wasn't just proof of her guilt. It was proof of who she really was, and maybe the only thing that had ever felt truly hers. So she locked it away again, even as fear pressed in. The investigators weren't finished. Over the next week, they interviewed operators, cross-checked armory logs, combed through equipment records. Williams stopped her again, voice low. They're asking who had access to his eyes narrowed. Your name came up. Her chest tightened. I inventory equipment, that's all. Make sure that's all, Williams warned. But his expression carried something she hadn't seen before, not just suspicion, something closer to uncertain respect. The paradox was suffocating. The more suspicion grew, the more her competence was noticed. The sharper their questions, the clearer her value became. And yet, recognition came tangled with threat. One evening Reeves found her again. He leaned against the wall outside the mess, his voice low, serious. They're looking in the wrong places. Whoever it was, whoever saved us, they're treating it like a crime. Flora swallowed. Disobeying orders is a crime. Maybe. Reeves's eyes studied hers, unflinching. But sometimes disobedience is the only reason anyone comes home. He paused, his tone softening. You ever think about that? Her throat closed. She wanted to tell him, to admit it, to unburden herself. But the words caught behind her teeth, heavy with consequences. Instead, she forced a faint smile. Get some rest, Sergeant. He didn't push, but his silence said he understood more than he admitted. The nights grew heavier. She lay awake, the echoes of her shots replaying in the dark. Each time she relived them, they felt both more distant and more immediate. Pride pulsed through her veins. Fear shadowed it. Would they court-martial her, discharge her, strip her of everything she had fought to prove? And yet beneath the fear something else simmered, a question she couldn't silence. If they had listened to her before, would Eagle Team have been trapped at all? The thought burned. Her invisibility had nearly cost lives. Her disobedience had saved them. Which one was truly the crime? Days turned into weeks, the investigation dragging on, every hour another weight pressing on her chest. But through it all, one truth grew clearer than ever. She could never go back to being just logistics, not after what she had done, not after what she had proven. And whether they punished her or not, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next time lives were on the line, she would not stay invisible. What happens when the truth is too useful to punish? That was the question hanging over every glance, every whispered conversation, every silent meeting behind closed doors. The investigation had stretched nearly a month, long enough for rumors to become stories, stories to become legends. The ghost on the ridge, soldiers called it now, an unseen hand with impossible precision. Some laughed, others swore by it, but no one dared claim it outright. Flora stayed silent. She moved like a shadow through the base, still fulfilling her duties, still invisible, yet more visible than ever. Eyes lingered on her longer now, not openly accusing, not openly believing, just waiting. And then the waiting ended. She was summoned again, this time not to office but to the conference room reserved for high-level briefings. The air was sharp, the blinds drawn tight. Sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. Beside him were two officers from higher command. Their uniforms carried rank that silenced rooms. Flora stood at attention. Her palms were damp but her posture unbroken. "Mitchell," one officer began, voice flat, "your record is exemplary, technical proficiency, attention to detail, no prior disciplinary issues." He flipped a file open, pages sliding beneath his fingers. "And yet," he paused, "during Eagle Team's engagement, 3 enemy snipers were neutralized by shots beyond the capability of any operator present. Shots consistent with the system, which you had access to." Flora's breath caught, but she said nothing. The officer leaned forward. "We know someone on this base fired those shots, and evidence points strongly in your direction." Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Sir, I was performing my assigned duties. Inventory, radio monitoring, nothing more." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then finally spoke, his tone edged with something more complicated than anger. "Mitchell, if you disobeyed orders, you endangered not only yourself but the entire unit. You undermined command structure. You violated trust. Do you understand the gravity of that?" "Yes, sir." "And yet," his eyes narrowed, his words slower now, "without those shots, Eagle Team would be dead. That's also a fact." The contradiction hung in the room like smoke. The higher officer closed the file. "This is not about evidence. We have enough to court-martial you if we choose. This is about necessity. You demonstrated capability that cannot be ignored." Flora's chest tightened. "Sir." "You will not be charged," he continued, his voice low but firm. "Instead, you are being transferred. Advanced Sniper School, effective immediately." For a moment she thought she misheard. Her mind spun, caught between disbelief and dread. His jaw clenched. He looked as though the decision burned him. "Understand this, Mitchell. This is not vindication. This is pragmatism. Command sees value where I saw risk. You will either succeed and be useful, or you will fail and disappear quietly." The words cut deep, but beneath them a fire sparked. She had fought for months in silence for a chance. And now that chance had arrived, not given freely but torn from the jaws of necessity. She saluted, her voice steady. "Understood, sir." Dismissed, she walked from the room with her pulse racing. Outside, the sky was pale and vast. Soldiers moved across the base, unaware of the verdict that had just reshaped her life. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe fully. Not freedom, not safety, but possibility. That evening Reeves found her again, leaning against the mess hall wall, his grin crooked. "Heard you're being moved. Sniper School." Flora stiffened. "Rumors travel fast." "Rumors always do," he said. His grin softened, his voice lowering. "I knew it was you, back on that ridge. Nobody else could done it." Her throat tightened. "You don't know that." "Maybe not, but I believe it." He paused, his gaze steady. "And I'm glad you did, because I'd be dead otherwise. We all would." For once she didn't argue. She didn't deny. She just let the silence stretch, filled with the truth neither of them needed to say aloud. That night she packed her gear. The notebook went in first, pages thick with calculations and memories. The letter to her sister followed, still sealed, still waiting. She paused, holding it a moment, then tucked it carefully between her uniforms. The helicopter waited at dawn, rotors chopping the mist. Was there, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his silence carried volumes. She saluted. He returned it, stiff, reluctant. She boarded the bird, the deck vibrating beneath her boots. As the helicopter lifted, the base shrank below, familiar, hostile, necessary. The mountains stretched ahead, endless and indifferent. For the first time, she wasn't running inventory. She wasn't invisible. She was being sent forward, not because they believed in her, but because they could no longer afford not to. As the horizon widened, she let the weight of it settle. She had broken rules, orders, crossed every line. And now, they were going to turn her into exactly what she had always known she could be. The irony was sharp. The system that had dismissed her was now reshaping itself around her, not because it wanted to, because it had no choice. And in the hum of the helicopter, in the roar of its blades, she realized something. Sometimes dignity doesn't come when others finally see you. Sometimes it comes when you refuse to stop acting, even when they don't. How do you measure change? By the medals pinned to your chest, or by the weight of the rifle you now carry with no apology. Months passed. Training stripped her down, rebuilt her. Sniper school was merciless. Long days of calculations under shifting winds. Nights of crawling belly flat through mud, unseen, unheard. Tests designed to break even the most confident. But Flora did not break. Every rejection she'd endured became fuel. Every dismissal sharpened her resolve. Where others strained, she found calm. Where others shook, she steadied. She wasn't the loudest. She wasn't the strongest, but she was relentless. Instructors noticed, quiet nods, subtle glances. She wasn't praised openly. Sniper school gave no praise, but in their silence she recognized something rare: respect. And when she graduated, when the patch was placed in her hand, it wasn't pride that filled her. It was vindication, proof that she had never been wrong about herself. But vindication didn't erase the weight, it only shifted it. Her first deployment came quick. An Allied convoy ambushed in the mountains, communications jammed, hostiles entrenched on ridges picking off vehicles one by one, another valley, another trap. The helicopter roared through low clouds, shuddering with turbulence. Flora sat in the back, resting across her knees. She felt the familiar heaviness of its weight, the vibration of its promise. Reeves sat opposite her, recovered now, scar on his arm, grin muted by the seriousness of the mission. He caught her eye, gave a small nod. No words needed. As the bird dipped lower, Flora's chest tightened. The memory of her first ridge came flooding back, the recoil, the silence, the fear. But this time was different. This time she wasn't sneaking, wasn't breaking rules. She was here because they needed her. Boots hit the ground, dust swirled, orders barked. The team moved fast, securing positions. The valley stretched ahead, the convoy pinned by fire from above. Hostiles in elevated positions, confident, relentless. Flora dropped prone, unfolding this bipod. The earth pressed cool against her body, steadying her. She extended her notebook, no longer hidden, no longer shameful. Range cards open, calculations memorized. Wind 12 knots shifting east. Range 1,030 meters. Target entrenched machine gun nest. Her breath slowed, the noise of the battle dulled, crosshairs settled. Inhale 4 seconds. Exhale 6. Pause still. She squeezed. The roar echoing across the valley. Through her scope the target collapsed, the nest silenced. Voices shouted. The convoy shifted, advancing. Her team pressed forward. She worked the bolt, chambered another round. Found the next target. Another hostile rifle flashing from cover. Another heartbeat silenced. Shot after shot measured, precise. Not vengeance, not glory, just mathematics, just discipline, just the quiet execution of everything she had always been capable of. And yet with every trigger pull, the weight grew heavier. She saw not just the enemy falling, but the echoes of the men she had first killed. Their eyes, their stillness. Necessary, yes, but unforgettable. War did not celebrate accuracy. It mourned necessity. Hours later, the valley was secure. The convoy rolled free. The wounded were tended. The dead were counted. And Flora sat on the ridge, resting silent, eyes distant. Reeves joined her, sitting in the dirt, his voice low. "You saved them again," he said. "Not a question, a statement." Flora didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, where smoke curled into the evening sky. Reeves sighed, leaning back on his elbows. "You know, back when we were pinned the first time, I thought we were finished, thought that was it. Then those shots came and everything changed. I didn't know it was you, not then. But now," he paused, glancing at her, "I can't imagine it being anyone else." She swallowed hard, her voice quiet. "It wasn't supposed to be me, not then." "But it was," he said simply. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything left unsaid. The choices, the disobedience, the lives saved, the lines crossed. Finally, Flora spoke, her words heavy, reflective. "Sometimes I wonder, did I save them because I believed I could, or because I refused to accept being invisible?" Reeves studied her. "Does it matter?" She didn't answer, because it did, and it didn't. The sky darkened, the last light bleeding over the ridges. The mission was over, but her war, the war inside her, was far from finished. She knew she would keep carrying this rifle. She would keep doing what others couldn't. Not for recognition, not for permission, but because once you stepped out of invisibility, you couldn't go back. And she knew one final truth, one that settled deep in her chest as the night closed around her. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't wait for permission. It simply acts. And in the silence after the thunder, dignity endures.